Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather, and happy Thursday, the 11th to you. Major weather coming again here to end the week with yet another powerful storm coming out of the Rockies that is going to produce a big time snowstorm, lots of wind, heavy rainfall, and some severe weather with tornadoes, certainly a possibility next couple of days. But that's not it. We are looking at an extreme blast of cold. In fact, the coldest air on Earth will be in place over Western Canada and parts of the north central northwestern US by the time we get to the end of this weekend. That cold's going to expand south and east. And the places that are dealing with some severe weather this week could be talking about some wintry weather as we get into next week. So I'm going to kind of break down what it looks like right now. And I will say this, with all this weather ongoing, with all this change, the forecast certainty is not through the roof here. There will be details that need to be fine tuned and changed. So what you're seeing today is potentially going to shift some. I'll talk about trends and what I personally think will happen, but I've been in this business for over 20 years, and I will say that there will probably be some changes. So come back here tomorrow, come back over the weekend. That's not the hook. That's I just want you guys to know that this can certainly shift here. So here's a look at what's on the map here over the next several days. Extreme changes in the weather. We're going to see major drop in temperatures coming with our first storm here, blizzard conditions over the Great Lakes into Canada here by the end of the week into the weekend. The same storm has the potential to produce some more tornadoes over northern Florida, portions of the southeast, and portions of Arkansas. This is still an evolving situation. I will say that the models are a little bit less damning, if you want to call it that, for strong tornadoes like we saw a few days ago. There were EF2s and EF3s across northern Florida and parts of South Carolina. That potential is not going to look quite as defined and quite as strong here as we get into tomorrow, but there is still a chance. It's kind of conditional, but still a chance we could see a tornado or two that gets to that strength. The bigger story for a lot of us, though, is the threat for snow and ice all the way down close to the Gulf Coast as we head towards next Monday and Tuesday, and the potential to maybe finally see a pretty good snowstorm here for portions of the Northeast. And as you can imagine, trying to predict that 5 days out is extremely difficult, and there will probably be shifts coming in that as well. Here's our next storm lining up across the Rocky Mountains, Wyoming down. You can kind of see the front here. It's pretty crazy to even see this, but here's a look at where our upper level feature is, and here's the front, and this is where the cold air is advancing. It's drilling south and eastward here, even the Pacific Northwest feeling this cold. We have a bit of a disturbance crossing the Great Lakes region just north of Chicago. That's going to advance east, bring a little bit of snow near and to the north of its track. And then we still have a very active southern jet stream. And these two are going to link up. This piece here and this piece here are going to link up and start to produce some severe weather overnight tonight. Maybe not across this entire area, maybe more in here. But as that cyclone cuts north and east to the Great Lakes, it does bring warm air up the East Coast. And so we're not really talking a winter storm for the big cities of the Northeast. There'll be snow across the interior, but this is going to be more of a rainstorm and a windstorm, unfortunately, for us. But that does stand to change here next week. Now, in the transition zone in here, we could see rain going over to very heavy snow by the start of the weekend, and conditions can very quickly change as temperatures drop, causing roads to become snow covered, ice up, and winds picking up, producing some potential blizzard conditions. And I think the best chance for that to happen is up in here. Even though the southern part of this area could see rain, it will go over to potential blizzard conditions. So we have an awful lot to talk about here, and I'm going to try to keep it pretty short, but I don't want to let anybody down here and skip your area if you're going to have major weather. So we have winter storm warnings in effect over the heartland here around Iowa, winter storm warnings over the interior of the Northwest, blizzard warnings in portions of Wyoming. And we also have winter weather advisories down across the Four Corners, and a terrible situation around Tahoe yesterday. Unfortunately, more snow coming on top of the avalanche that we saw there yesterday. Flood watches in effect for portions of New England. You can see here high wind watches and warnings over portions of the South. This will expand into the Great Lakes as well. And I expect to see more winter storm warnings in here tomorrow. These are watches now. They'll shift to warnings. There may even be blizzard warnings for some parts of this area as we see those winds cranking up here. And the other story is the major cold coming. We're off the charts cold here. It doesn't get any lower than 33 degrees below average, according to my chart here from Weather Bell. But look at the large expansive area that starts dropping south and east on Friday. And then over the weekend, we see that cold expanding down into Oklahoma, Texas, and as far east as Indiana. Many places 20 to 30 degrees below average, and that's going to impact a lot of travel. There are NFL games this weekend. Kansas City comes to mind as being a host in areas that could be below, not just below freezing, but below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Just some brutal cold coming, and that is going to eventually make its way into the Tennessee Valley. Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we see that potential for 30-degree temperature anomalies below the average. And that cold's going to recycle. We're going to see more of it coming eventually here, probably towards the last week of the month, but details on that are still a bit uncertain. What I will say is the South and the East do see this shot of cold. It's not going to be as extreme, but extreme enough to produce potential winter storm hazards here coming in waves over the next week or so. Here's what we're looking at temperature-wise, and you see that 50-degree below zero mark here in Alberta. That is tomorrow morning. You can't pay me to be out in that kind of cold, to be honest. You can't pay me anyway, but anyway, it's just ridiculous. And that cold's going to expand with sub-zero temperatures getting down into much of the Northwest and especially the Northern Rockies and Plains, the coldest air on Earth in place. And we just see it continuing in waves. There'll be somewhat of a warm up. Hate to say that 15 degrees is warm, but compared to what we're dealing with by the middle of next week, it does warm back up. But then we see another wave of cold coming to some of the same locations, say around the 23rd or 24th. The central United States is going to feel this as well. You know, it's about 50 degrees in Dallas here this morning, and we'll be in the 60s today in Dallas. We're talking teens by the time we get to next week. Look at this cold coming. Wave number one behind our big cyclone here tomorrow. That'll drop temperatures down into the 30s and 40s in Texas, sub-zero temperatures tomorrow night into parts of Kansas and Nebraska. And the cold just keeps drilling south and east as we see temperatures very close to where they were right before Christmas last winter, 2022. So here's that cold coming down. And we see it in full force here with a fresh snowpack. We are going to have 20-degree plus temperatures below zero in places like southwest Wisconsin, eastern parts of Iowa. Chicago turns into Siberia here, and the cold just continues. I mean, as we look at Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we see temperatures well below zero in parts of Arkansas and Oklahoma, where there will be fresh snowpack, below zero in parts of Tennessee and Kentucky. This is severe, and single digits and teens all the way down to Interstate 20. Gets to a point where the Gulf Coast, while we'll be below freezing, won't see that much extreme. But it will be extreme enough. And we just continue this cold wave night after night of sub-zero temperatures across the upper Midwest. Finally, in the East, we're not going to be immune to the cold, but it will be muted some. Take a look at this warmth here tomorrow evening. We may be up to about 70 degrees in Myrtle Beach and Florence, South Carolina, and in the 60s in places like Richmond. So windows will be open here until the weather hits. Then we see a huge drop coming. Saturday's that transition day. Sunday is colder, as we have temperatures in the evening Sunday dropping below freezing, and then the cold continues to advance eastward here. And by next Tuesday and Wednesday, we're looking at teens in Atlanta, teens in Spartanburg, teens in Raleigh, Baltimore, low 20s in parts of New York. There's actually going to be a wave coming up the coast here on Tuesday. That's going to keep the cold from advancing too far south and east, but it is coming. And eventually we see that here by next Wednesday night and Thursday. And that's going to change some on this model, but just know that it's coming. Whoops, I already gave you the ending here. All right, here's a look at our first storm. Low pressure cranking up here over Missouri and Arkansas tonight. That is going to quickly deepen as it cuts up the Ohio River here tomorrow morning. And we've got a low pressure system that will be one of its strongest on record in January in Indiana. We saw a pressure record broken already earlier this week in Indianapolis. This one stands a chance to be a little bit stronger. And that actually means we've got more of a push of warm air into central Illinois and Indiana, and even southeastern Michigan, where at the height of the storm, we could be talking about rain here late tomorrow into tomorrow evening. But after that low passes, the difference between this storm and the last is that the cold air is on the move, and it will wrap in here very quickly. And we'll see a shift over to very heavy snow falling here later tomorrow night into the first part of Saturday. The Northeast sees heavy rain. The Southeast sees a window for some severe weather. I don't think we're going to see quite as much intense wind with this one over the Southeast. We're not going to see as many places talking about 70, 80, 90 mile per hour wind gusts, but nonetheless, I don't want you to let your guard down. All it takes is one storm, one tornado warning to cause havoc across this area. And somebody that maybe escaped the weather Tuesday could see it here on Friday. It gets colder this weekend. We see this front kind of camping out in South Florida and then kind of just getting stuck there. You're not going to see the cold in South Florida. You'll see the wet weather. But here comes the next wave here on Sunday. And it looks to go south of Kansas City and more into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Tennessee by the time we get into Monday. There's actually kind of two separate features here that kind of link up. The trends with this low pressure system now have it offshore rather than cutting up across New York City for the most part. The GFS model doesn't want to participate in that, but I suspect it's going to trend back to the south and east on this. Again, this can change. It may not look exactly like this, but we certainly see a more promising chance for snow across the Northeast until this exits on Wednesday. And then we see another system cutting down and east, and this one could bring more winter weather down to some of the same spots. But again, let's not get too focused on that. So the storm that's coming early next week, you can see the European has shifted. This was the model I showed you yesterday morning showing a big snow for the interior of New England. Now it's showing a better chance across southern New England and the mid-Atlantic region. Still has the chance for snow over the mid-south as I advance this for you guys. And we just lost what I wanted to show you, but that's okay. You see that potential has grown here all the way into the mid-Atlantic region for potentially a significant amount of snow. Maybe not a major blizzard or nor'easter, but one that has potential snow with it. The GFS model, here's a look at what's going on here, and not much change from the first system here. Big snow across Michigan. Here's the next one, and what I will say is it has started to trend a little bit more to the south, a little bit more suppressed, whereas the highest totals that were showing up over southern Illinois and Indiana have shifted a little bit farther south here for Sunday night, Monday, and Monday night, more into Tennessee, into Arkansas here. So some of these areas that'll have severe weather tonight could see 6 or 7 inches of snow on Monday in parts of Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. As we go on further into time, the GFS has cut down a little bit on the amount of snow here in New England. But the other thing I wanted to show you is that it still does have that chance in the Northeast. And this is the latest run of the GFS. It does not have as much snow for the Northeast, big cities of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic as the European. But that doesn't mean it isn't going to end up that way. Here's a blend of the models. Don't get focused on this too much in the Midwest. It's not going to work out that way. But here's a look at just 12-hour snows. And you can see kind of the epicenter of the next storm looks to be around Memphis, Tennessee. A blend of all the models shows an inch. There are obviously higher amounts showing up on some of these models. And then as we take that through, kind of the meat of this storm looks to be right around New York City, the Poconos, and central and southern New England. But we have possibilities for snow all the way down to places like Raleigh and Virginia Beach. So more on that in the forecast to come. I will show you the shorter term here. Here's our first storm moving into the plains quickly. This is around midnight tonight. And we see snow breaking out across Iowa and eastern Nebraska. We see a wintry mix over northern Missouri, and we see showers and storms. Some of them could be intense here over parts of Arkansas. As we get to tomorrow, that wave lifts, and we see maybe a potential shift to some rain on the south side of Chicago, rain in St. Louis, but this will go back to snow here as the upper low follows it and brings colder air aloft in. And we've got a rain snow line struggle fight here over central and eastern Illinois into central Indiana, northwestern Ohio. Looks like at the height of the storm, we're talking rain, but a shift back to some snow, but that's going to cut your totals down quite a bit. The other thing I wanted to mention in the Northwest, the models that showed this system moving into Washington and producing ice have suppressed it further south as it's just too cold to do anything in Seattle and Portland. But we could have an ice storm over parts of Oregon here with snow across the interior, heavy rain in Northern California as well. Here's a closer look at that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. See this boundary dropping south here this afternoon? It's already down south of the Columbia River here by tomorrow. And instead of this being an ice setup here in Washington, we actually see it down in places like Eugene, Oregon. The orange is sleet, the pink is freezing rain, and it's a threat all the way to the central coast of Oregon. Snow across the higher elevations and across the northern Willamette Valley here between Portland and Salem. So not as much of an ice threat now in Washington, more of a problem here for Washington, or for Oregon, I'm sorry. I've been there several times, I know the difference. Here's a look at the Midwest, and we see our storm moving in here later on tonight, and showers and storms all the way up to places like Champaign, Illinois. Some freezing rain possible as well in southeastern Iowa and north central parts of Illinois. And this should come in as snow or a mix of snow and sleet in places like DeKalb, Aurora, Romeoville to the south side of Chicago. And then we see it switch to some lighter rain tomorrow morning and then back to snow tomorrow night. So very interesting to track. This is the NAM model. It's not always the model of choice for winter storms, but it does indicate where this cooling starts happening here tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock Central Time. And later tomorrow evening and overnight tomorrow night, we do see the potential for blizzard conditions around Lake Michigan. Looking at the larger view here, you can see weak storm system coming through with some light snow today and tonight. Then the next one moves into the western Great Lakes, and this will bring heavy snow rates into Ontario, but we could see a shift to rain in Hamilton and Toronto before going back to snow. The rain likelihood is actually going to be early in the day on Saturday, about 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and then a shift back to snow here later in the morning, and a lot of wind coming as well. Here's a look at the official National Weather Service snow forecast. And generally speaking, I don't think we're going to see a foot in Chicago. The lake is going to come into play here and probably across Indiana as well. But central and northern Michigan, eastern, central Wisconsin, far northern Illinois all have the best chance of seeing 10 inches plus out of this, potentially 2 feet around Marquette, Michigan. So a very intense amount of snow coming. It'll be spread out over about a day or so. We also see some higher amounts on the front end of this over the northern parts of the Northeast. Here's a look at the next storm, and we see just quite a bit of snow and ice beginning to develop as this cold air undercuts a milder air aloft in North Texas here by early Monday. So late Sunday night, Monday morning could be very nasty around the Metroplex, and that continues all the way down into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama by late Saturday night, Tuesday. This is the freezing rain. This is the pink. That's what you should be most concerned about. This is the sleet possibility, this orange here, not as big of a chance. And then here's the snow chance as well. And the European says there could even be snowflakes falling down the Interstate 10 in Louisiana. Not a big snow, but enough of one to obviously be an impact here. Here's a look at the European for Texas, and we see the freezing rain chances beginning to climb here after dark Sunday night over the hill country and then spreading north and east to the I-20 corridor early in the day on Monday. This is 6 a.m. Central, and we already have the potential for about 1/10 of an inch of ice glaze on the I-20 corridor, with the Metroplex kind of being right in the middle of that. The heavy ice threat's going to shift a little bit east. This is just one model, but it shows it over northeast Texas into the Piney Woods region here around Lake Sabine. And the big chance for that, or Sabine Reservoir, the best chance for that actually is going to be Monday afternoon and evening. And we could even see some frozen precipitation down to near the Gulf Coast here by Tuesday morning. Here's a look further east at that ice potential. And as we get into Sunday night, it expands into southern Arkansas and then into central and northern parts of Mississippi and all the way down to Lafayette, Baton Rouge, St. Helena Parish here, St. Francisville, Macomb, Mississippi, Monday night, early Tuesday as temperatures just crash here. Farther east, I don't think we're talking as much freezing rain once you get east of Birmingham. The moisture kind of shuts off according to this model. It'll be cold and things will ice up, but we're not seeing frozen precipitation. The other thing to talk about is snow. This first system could produce an inch or two over parts of Oklahoma and southern Missouri, but that's not going to be anything compared to the next one coming. We see this dropping down through Kansas on Sunday afternoon into Oklahoma and Arkansas Sunday night, and the potential in 12 to 24 hours of snowfall amounts getting up to 6 inches around Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and maybe even as much as 9, 10 inches in places like Muskogee and off to the east into Arkansas. So this could be a substantial snowfall here before it exits later on Tuesday. Farther south and east, we see that snow showing up in Arkansas. It could start snowing in places like Memphis, into Paducah, Kentucky, all the way over to Nashville here early in the day on Monday. And then you can see there is a fine line where it does kind of shut off in northwestern and northern Georgia and western North Carolina. But this potentially, depending on how this plays out, could be a very major snowstorm for some folks in here. There's also a chance we see the shift in the other direction. And I just don't know yet how that's going to play out. But a very substantial amount of snow. This is just 24 hours of it. And then you can see it shuts down here. Not going to be a Gulf Coast snowstorm, but certainly one across parts of the Mid-South, as well as the Northeast. Here's a look at the first storm on Saturday, then the lake effect Saturday afternoon, and especially Sunday and Sunday afternoon, potentially over a foot in southern Erie County, as well as over parts of the Tug Hill here. With the wind out of the west-southwest, this will probably cause some major issues for the Bills playoff game. And then the next storm system follows, and the European says it's more of an issue for the coast than it is across the interior Northeast. We have not seen something like that yet in the last couple of winters. A closer look here shows you that. As we get into Tuesday, we see snow spreading across the mid-Atlantic region. Then Tuesday night, or actually even at the end of the day, Tuesday around Philly and New York. And then according to the European this morning, this could be a substantial snowfall for the East Coast. But again, this is still 5-6 days away, and the certainty level of that happening is not super high. Winds are going to be a big problem again here, especially across the Smokies, across West Virginia here. As we get later into tomorrow, we see wind potential of 60 to 70 miles per hour. The Great Lakes, 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts here tomorrow night into early Saturday. Even Lake Erie wind gusts may get over 60 miles per hour. And New England, while not as strong as the last storm, we do have another high wind event coming. Gusts at the coast will be over 40 miles per hour, maybe 60 to 70 near the nearshore waters. So a powerful storm coming. The next storm's not going to produce that kind of wind with it. You can see here, standard 20, 30 mile per hour wind gusts, not a big deal at that point. But we have a lot of liquid coming out of this as well. Big time liquid cutting up to the western Great Lakes. Amounts this weekend, especially a Friday afternoon, Friday night, again, 1 to 2 inches over parts of the Northeast. Not as big as the last storm, but substantial enough to cause problems as we're dealing with this freshwater flooding now. The next system is going to bring its heavier moisture down into Florida and the southeastern coast. So it's not going to be a big flood maker for us, fortunately. Don't want to ignore the threat for severe weather. I will say this is kind of an uncertain forecast, even for tonight over the Arklatex region. There is an enhanced risk in here with the potential for a few stronger tornadoes. Don't think right now it's going to look like it did here Monday night, but certainly something we've got to watch. Severe winds also a possibility across this region, and large hail possible in northeast Texas, southeastern Oklahoma, western and central parts of Arkansas here later this evening, and especially overnight tonight. We have an enhanced risk tomorrow from basically central and southern parts of Alabama, or southeast Alabama, I should say, across central Georgia, including Atlanta, into the Midlands of South Carolina, all the way up into the Sandhills of North Carolina. And this can still shift some. The area that I am kind of concerned about is parts of Middle Tennessee and Kentucky for wind damage. I don't think, though, tornadoes will be as likely, but I wouldn't be shocked if somebody in the marginal risk did see a tornado. So just because you're in the marginal, don't let your guard down on this. It's a very powerful cyclone coming. The other thing I want to point out is that in central Florida, again, we are probably under the gun tomorrow, and that threat could start well before lunchtime. So be preparing for that again along the I-4 corridor, and of course points northward as well. Tornado chances, again, this is conditional, but they're highest in the area of the enhanced risk from Alabama into North Carolina. There's a severe wind threat actually a little farther north and west, including the Triad, the Triangle, Charlotte, Atlanta, and even into parts of the upstate of South Carolina. And there's a chance for some hail in here, a better chance of what we saw on Tuesday for some hail across this region. Real quick, I'll show you the models here. This is a big struggle because we just don't have the confidence level in this becoming a major severe weather outbreak, but it certainly could be one. And the last thing we want to see are people letting their guard down just because the models say that the instability maybe isn't quite as intense as what it originally thought. There still is a chance here. You see there's a lot of action showing up on the radar here. This is going to be around 4 in the morning here tonight from southeast Oklahoma right on up into downstate Illinois. As we get to tomorrow, that threat continues to shift eastward, and there are some individual discrete cells we need to keep an eye on here, Kentucky and Tennessee, all the way down into Georgia. And then this turns into kind of a squall line that moves through here with briefly strong wind by tomorrow evening. This is around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock here tomorrow evening, followed by the colder air and the wind that will follow it. Looking at the southeast, or looking at the tornado parameters, they're not through the roof here, but they're pretty high here in eastern Oklahoma later on tonight, shifting into Arkansas. Now, as we get to tomorrow, the threat for stronger tornadoes is certainly pretty low, but it isn't zero over parts of Mississippi. You see, there's also just a little area that I would keep an eye on here, sneaking into northwest Tennessee and western Kentucky. And this is an area that is no stranger to stronger tornadoes, even on days that look pretty marginal. So just keep an eye on things here. This is around lunchtime tomorrow, and then this is early afternoon. Then we see that kind of falling apart before it gets to Louisville in the evening. Looking farther south and east, very interesting setup here. We've got kind of some competing factors. We have pretty strong wind shear, but not the dynamics in play for strong tornadoes everywhere. But this starts early in the day in Florida, around 7 or 8 in the morning, and then expands northward. And a lot of individual cells in this area. The coverage isn't as great as what we saw on Tuesday, but it's big enough for there to be a threat for some tornadoes across the Panhandle, across southern and eastern Alabama, central Georgia, and then spreading into the Carolinas here later in the day. So I will keep you posted tomorrow morning on this potential threat for some tornadoes, certainly a threat for hail and strong wind. You can see the tornado parameters not super high, but Florida, we definitely have to watch things here. And then kind of another area that builds up here in the early evening tomorrow night. Appreciate y'all's time. I know I went long here today, just so much to talk about, but I will continue to advance this weather system here and talk about what's to be expected again tomorrow. I apologize if I don't get to all of your comments and questions. I'll just be honest with you guys. It's a very busy time for me, but I will do my best here to respond if I can. Thank you all so much for your time. Please consider becoming a subscriber if you haven't already. And I really appreciate y'all. I want you to be safe here. And the goal here is for everybody to be prepared and nobody to be caught off guard. So I thank you all. You mean a ton to me. And I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for me to be here today. Exodus 15:2-3, the Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation. My Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Every day is a blessing. Nothing is guaranteed, but with the Lord, we are given the strength to persist no matter what. He has prepared salvation for us if we choose to believe in him. And I feel I'm called to share that with you. It's a very gift to be here day after day on earth and to have the option to accept Jesus, knowing that my sins have been washed clean. The Lord is a man of war. This doesn't mean God is violent. It means that he has sent Jesus to go to war for us so that we can live eternally. That is the war that we're fighting, the war against enemy forces. And I want to pray for you because I truly believe in the power of prayer, that everybody here on earth struggles with their faith. A lot of folks don't have faith, and it's not up to me to judge because I've been there. But just know that we can't do everything ourselves. We need to go to the Lord and call on him to go to war for us. He's already done that through his son, Jesus Christ. He can do it for you. He does it for me every day. And I would be happy to pray for you no matter what you're going through today. I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday, and I look forward to talking with you again tomorrow. Stay safe.